Good afternoon and welcome to the show. It's Health and Living. I'm Mira Sivasodi. Now, there is another epidemic hiding behind the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is a widespread mental health crisis. All over the world, I think there's been a lot been said about this mental health crisis as a result of lockdowns and the presence of this virus. There have been economic uncertainties, there have been social isolation, a lot of anxieties that has brought about these mental health problems. And you know what? The risk of suicides have also gone up. So on the line with me, helping me to understand the situation and to look at Malaysia in particular, Victor Tan from the Befrienders Kuala Lumpur and Evelyn Sung, a consultant psychologist. Welcome to the show. How are both of you today?
Doing good.
Thanks a lot, Mira.
So
Anytime. I'm going to start with Victor. Victor, did you see a surge in calls to the Befrienders during the lockdown over the last 2 to 3 months, perhaps?
Yes, definitely. So as part of our daily operational activities, we keep track of the number of calls and what categories they fall into. So at the start of the MCO, we saw about 9% of our callers who were, getting in touch with MCO or COVID-related issues. And that basically grew from week to week. So by the end of April or start of early May, close to 40% of the callers who were contacting us were actually having issues directly related to MCO or the COVID-19 pandemic.
Could you just elaborate a little bit more when you say issues in relation to the pandemic? Was it exhaustion? Was it frustration?
Yeah, so it could be, there's such a wide variety. I guess I'll probably go into detail on this later in this session. But in general, people were worried about their physical health, about loss of jobs, financial situations. Some mental health patients had their appointments with a psychiatrist cancelled because of the initial influx of patients and the focus of the doctors and the mental health system on coping with COVID-19. So yeah, it's just really a wide range of issues that people generally already have problems coping with, but were further exacerbated by the lockdown as well as the pandemic.
And how did you cope at the Befrienders? Because I remember we spoke to you in 2019 and you already had challenges with volunteers in getting funding. I can't imagine this was so unexpected. How did you cope?
It was kind of pretty stressful. The main point of stress for us was actually transitioning from taking calls at a center to taking calls at home. So our system that we have in place basically requires all our volunteers to go to a center and actually take calls from there, okay? And we had a landline system that was kind of wired up for that. And it's something that we've been pretty much accustomed to. It's kind of hardwired into our operational, mindset for the past, for as long as we've been operating. So when the lockdown reached a more serious phase and the government was saying like, hey, you guys can't go out except for the absolute most essential stuff, we literally couldn't get approval from the authorities for our volunteers to travel center. So the only way to keep our services open to the public was to actually somehow provide a way for, volunteers to take calls or receive calls from our callers from the public at home. So we had to transition from our traditional landline system to using Skype. We had to have a call center system kind of thing worked, put into place so that we could, channel calls that were coming into our public helplines to the respective mobile numbers of volunteers. So all of that was pretty much a real operational nightmare. Kind of getting it all into place and then getting it into the scheduling system that we have. And then, getting our volunteers, a lot of them who may not have touched the PC for a long time to start learning how to use Skype and stuff like that.
It's not only that, Victor. I think, a service like this, we now know is an essential service. And if you were categorized as an essential service, you would be able to operate. And the reason I say this is because we've spoken to Hospice Malaysia. They also had issues with their people going out to provide the care in the community. And they were not an essential service. So they couldn't. They eventually recognized it, but, not for a while.
Yeah.
You were saying just now, Victor, you wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, I think this whole, from what I gather as well, a lot of people were also having stress and difficulties transitioning from, that kind of normal work routine and schedule that we're all used to. Like we go to work at 9, come back at 5. Now we're stuck at home all the time and then we have to take care of the kids and then we have to, do stuff that we don't normally are used to doing at certain times of the day. And so I guess it was just really stressful for everyone.
Yeah. What about you, Evelyn? Yeah. What about you, Evelyn? How did you cope during that time? I mean, I'm sure patients who needed treatment couldn't come to see you. And also there would have been newer cases and people wanting to contact you. How did you manage through the lockdown?
Right. So basically, I run my own private practice. So during this lockdown, we were basically closed throughout the MCO period. So we had to make adjustment because traditionally we offer our therapy services face-to-face or either through home visits, like going to the client's house. But because of this whole MCO, then we had to move again, just like what Victor shared, we have to move everything online. But as we are moving things online, there's also, some challenges in terms of the types of engagement that we have with our clients, because not only, you can't see this person in person, right? There's also a lot of, you need to prepare your clients for any possible interruption. And also to ensure sometimes, when we are having session through Zoom or Skype, to make sure that they have their own personal space, because we don't want, if there are certain family members peeking or listening to them. So these are some of the logistical stuff that we had to manage as well. We do see marginalized communities like the refugees provide services for them. So during this time, most of them don't have smartphones. So we had to move therapy to do it through audio. So there's a lot of all these different kind of adjustments, not just, types of engagement, issues about private and confidential as well. But I do see actually during this MCO, there are also new opportunities as well, because a lot of us, we spend most of our time online. So to actually make our services more relevant, we actually, plan out like group sessions online, where people can catch up, like a mama online session, not necessarily a therapy session, but basically to make sure everyone is still connected during this time.
Like a support group, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hence the reason why they got rid of the word social distancing to physical distancing, because socially we really don't want to start distancing because it's already, the situation is dire. I mean, social isolation was already becoming a problem with the advent of gadgets and tech even before this. Do you think this has just sped up the process, or is this something else?
When you're talking about whether this is increasing the distance, is it?
In terms of social isolation, is it becoming more of a problem now with the lockdown and the MCO and all of that? Do you think it sort of made the process worse? Because, before we were worried about social isolation, that people spent so much time on their gadgets and all of that. They were not mixing. They had issues there. Do you think this is just going to make it worse?
I think it will be a yes and no. I don't have a direct answer to that because, we can also see different generations. We all interact very differently. Like, for instance, for, let's say, the millennials right now, they can engage better through, let's say, gadgets kind of interaction. Yeah, but nonetheless, of course, there's also always this lack of human touch, right? Because I do hear teens sharing about them missing their friends as well. So I would say yes, it increases some form of isolation, but it also helps people to connect in different ways through the available technology right now that we have.
Victor, now that we are in the so-called RMCO, we're in the recovery MCO stage, how would people with mental health issues be affected by these changes, for an example? Things are almost going back to normal. I think schools have started yesterday. One lot has already gone back to school. And we moved into a mode of living which was very different in the past. I will be honest, some of us got quite comfortable with the whole working from home thing. We had our time away from the office. A lot of us here at BFM work on a rotation, and we come in that 1 week to the office. We work like mad, but at least we know the following week we're going to be home and we can breathe a little. And now that, if everybody were to come back and start working as normal, Victor, do you foresee that there could be problems with that situation as well?
Yeah, so basically, I think right now with the recovery phase, a lot of us, we are slowly trying to ease back to this transition, right? And as much as, maybe some of us took 1 to 2 months to get adjusted with the whole MCO working from home. And I think that at this point, it will also take us as long as this, like 1 to 2 months, to get readjusted to this whole new normal. And with individuals, say, with mental health issues, right now, I hear that in hospitals, my peers share that, follow-ups are slowly opening up. But no doubt that there are also an influx of new patients coming in, which is taking them a longer time to see as well, because during the MCO, they basically, freeze intake of seeing new clients. So with that leads on to, more backlog in that sense. But also I think during the MCO and even recovery right now, there are also a lot of, heightened distress when it comes to social or environmental factors. For instance, some of us are still working from home, and we still have to, stay in together with our family members. And a lot of them, some of my clients actually shared that during this period of time, they actually feel more stressed out because they feel that they don't have this personal space. Mm-hmm. At least when they go to work, they can have like 8, 9 hours or 10 hours out from home to have this breather. But during this time, even during the recovery period, it's still stressful staying at home. And I'm not sure how is it going to be like in Malaysia, because in China, they found out that there's a surge of divorce rates since COVID-19, the outbreak. So not sure how is it going to be here in Malaysia, but generally we do see that people are trying to really cope during this time of uncertainty.
Makes you think about how our grandmothers and some of our mothers did it, isn't it? They had no escape. They couldn't go to work, and you sometimes wonder how they pull through during their time. Victor, do you see a change during the RMCO at Befrienders? I mean, have the pattern of calls changed? Are there different issues coming up now?
Sorry, you are talking about right now as opposed to like during the MCO period?
Yes, because we're recovering now. We're sort of coming out of it. Do you see a change?
Right. I think we do see a decline in the number of calls where callers explicitly mention being stressed by the MCO. Obviously, the MCO is kind of lifted now. It's almost more or less back to normal, or at least a new normal. Or even we don't get that many more callers who expressly, talk about being worried about, getting COVID-19 or being infected with COVID-19. So there's been a decline there, I guess. And so it's like those issues are still affecting them. But they don't explicitly mention it. They don't say like, I'm worried about getting COVID-19 or whatever. It's just there in the background. And other issues, they tend to focus more on the specific issues that, they're troubling them. So in a sense, we are kind of going back to normal again, in the sense that the same kind of issues or problems that callers are grappling with, you would see them discussing that or bringing up that in conversations with us as they did prior to the MCO. So yeah, in that sense, there is a kind of transition. But at the same time as well, there's also this kind of, people will make kind of references to, COVID-19, like just in a very kind of casual manner. It's like something that's in the background, is acknowledged, but they don't dwell too much on it, right? They might say like, because of this MCO, I can't go and see my boyfriend as much as I like to, and then that's it. You just kind of move on. It doesn't become such a big thing anymore for them, because I guess they kind of gotten used to it. So, yeah.
Okay. We'll come back and find out sort of demographics of people who were calling the Befrienders. And usually you would call the Befrienders if you are suicidal. So obviously you were not just getting calls from people who are suicidal, but we'll come back and discuss how many of those calls actually made up of people who were indeed had suicidal tendencies, as well as I want to know if you think the psychological effects of COVID-19 will long outlast the pandemic itself. That's coming up next on Health and Living on BFM 89.9.